He ordered the entire United States Embassy to evacuate Burkina Faso. In one stroke, the most dominant superpower on Earth was forced to lower its flag and leave. This was not a diplomatic dispute. It was a thunderbolt that shook Washington, Paris, Brussels, Moscow, and Beijing all at once. Was this madness or courage? A reckless miscalculation, or the birth of real independence? That night in Ouagadougou, the question echoed through the streets. Can a nation under siege choose dignity over dependency and survive, or must it forever bend under the weight of foreign influence? Standing before his people, Traore declared, "We are not removing an embassy. We are removing the arrogance that has enslaved Africa for generations." His words spread like wildfire across the Sahel, daring the world to dismiss him now. Inside the presidential palace, the mood was tense. An American intelligence report lay open on the mahogany table, pages slashed with Traore's red markings. "Hear this," he said coldly, his tone sharp as steel. "They dare categorize our armed forces with terrorists. They place our soldiers, the only shield between villages and annihilation, beside the killers of our Binda." His defense minister shifted uneasily, suggesting it might be a misunderstanding. Traore's fist hit the table with thunder. "Misunderstand? 2 million of our people displaced since 2016. 2,000 civilians murdered last year. Even the UN admits it. And yet Washington, safe in its marble chambers, brands our protectors as butchers. What arrogance fuels such lies? For officials in America, the report was routine bureaucracy. For Traore, it was a blade in the heart. He summoned his press secretary and gave the order, "Announce it to the people. Let every mother who buried a son know how America labels him." That evening, state television broadcast his fury across the nation. "Who grants the United States the power to define our worth?" The anchor demanded. In the barracks of Kaya, soldiers sat in silence, fists clenched. One whispered bitterly, "We bled in Jibo, we fought in Yaga, and they call us Al-Qaeda." Another shook his head. "Our captain speaks the truth." The next morning, Traore assembled his cabinet. His voice cut through the silence. "Every day our men stand in Soum and Udalan, holding the line against jihadists who burn schools and slaughter families. And what does America see? Numbers on paper, casualties in reports. They count bodies, but not widows. They mention violations, but never sacrifice. Tell me, do they calculate the price we pay?" The ministers lowered their eyes. Only the ceiling fan marked the seconds. Traore pressed on. "This is not justice. This is narrative control. If they call us terrorists, what legacy will remain of Burkina Faso? What story will our children inherit? Shall we allow others to define us, or will we seize our identity ourselves?" The answer spilled into the streets. Demonstrations erupted, banners declaring, "Sovereignty is not for sale." From the palace balcony, Traore faced the crowd. "They tell you your soldiers are criminals," he shouted. "But I tell you they are guardians. They fall so you may rise. Shall we kneel before foreign capitals that know nothing of our pain?" The roar came back like thunder. "No." An aide whispered nervously about America's aid, funds for food, schools, medicine. Traore silenced him. "Aid without dignity is bondage. Better hunger in freedom than bread in humiliation. They want us on our knees. But we are not beggars. We are a nation." That night, alone in his study, Traore gazed into the fading Sahel light. "They will call us poor," he whispered, "but we are not voiceless. They will call us fragile, but we are not broken. If I let this insult stand, I betray every soldier buried in Sahel dust." The report lay closed before him. The seed had been planted, not in Washington, but in Ouagadougou, and none could predict the storm it would unleash. By dawn, soldiers blocked the boulevard to the American embassy, rifles across their shoulders. Behind the gates, frantic staff packed boxes under the blazing Sahel sun. The U.S. flag hung heavy, waiting to be lowered. Inside the compound, Traore's voice struck like iron. "Write it clearly. The entire embassy, not just its ambassador. They did not insult a man, they insulted a nation. And Burkina Faso will not bow." His foreign minister hesitated. "Captain, this has never been done. They will retaliate." Traore leaned forward, his hand slamming the table. "Retaliate? We are already bleeding. 2,000 dead last year. 2 million displaced. And Washington equates our soldiers with jihadists. Tell me, what cost is greater than dishonor? What price is heavier than silence? By noon, the decree was signed. By evening, it was broadcast to the world. The U.S. Embassy was declared persona non grata. Staff ordered to depart within 72 hours. The stars and stripes would no longer fly over Ouagadougou. Crowds surged at the gates, chanting sovereignty is not for sale. Women ululated. Youth waved Burkinabe flags. Elders lifted their hands in prayer. When Marines lowered the American flag, it felt less like protocol than a funeral for foreign dominance. A veteran on crutches raised his voice. For decades, they told us we were too weak to stand. Today, our captain proves them wrong. We bury not America, but arrogance itself. That night, Traore addressed the nation. His words cut like fire. We are not expelling a building. We are expelling an attitude. Aid without respect is slavery. Partnership without dignity is fraud. We choose dignity. Even if we stand alone, we stand as a nation, not as a colony. His eyes burned into the camera. They will call us reckless. But tell me, is it reckless to honor those who die daily on the Sahel front lines? Is it reckless to promise our children they inherit a proud land, not a beggar's bowl? By the next morning, black convoys rolled out of the embassy compound. Behind tinted windows, American staff stared at defiant crowds shouting along the roadside. The gates clanged shut for the last time. For the first time in decades, the United States no longer held a foothold in Burkina Faso. Inside government chambers, a minister warned of the $100 million in lost aid. Traore lifted his hand. Let them close their checkbooks. A school built on humiliation teaches only slavery. A clinic funded with contempt heals nothing. Shall our children learn that their lives are worth aid, but not dignity? Silence answered him. Outside, the echoes of the departing convoys faded, but from the rooftops, the chant still rang. Sovereignty is not for sale. By dawn in Washington, alarms had reached the State Department. Screens blazed with images of the U.S. flag being lowered. This is not a dispute, an aide said. It is rupture. A sharp statement was drafted, warning of suspended aid and isolation. News networks declared Burkina Faso risks collapse. Analysts predicted disaster. But in Ouagadougou, Captain Ibrahim Traoré remained unshaken. Let them call it suicide, he told his ministers. What life is worth living without honor? One diplomat in Brussels muttered nervously. Traoré is cutting the last rope that still ties him to Europe. Across the continent, cautious statements began to flow. Warnings of isolation, of broken cooperation, of a small nation walking blindly into the storm. But in Ouagadougou, those same lines were read with defiance. Isolation from what? Traoré asked his council. From chains we never asked to wear. His words landed like a challenge, not just to Europe, but to the very language of dependency itself. Moscow saw opportunity where others saw chaos. On Russian state television, anchors hailed Traoré as a symbol of defiance. Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov stood before microphones and, with deliberate weight, declared, "This is not madness. This is emancipation. Africa is showing it will not bow to neocolonial dictates." We applaud Burkina Faso. In the palace, an aide asked carefully, "Captain, Russia praises you loudly. Shall we lean toward them?" Traoré shook his head. "Let them praise. But remember, dignity is not for hire. We do not trade one master for another." Beijing, in contrast, remained silent on camera. No fiery speeches, no headlines. Instead, Chinese envoys arrived quietly in Ouagadougou with offers of humanitarian shipments and technical aid. Their message, delivered behind closed doors, was simple. We do not interfere. We only partner. Traoré studied the proposal closely. Notice the difference, he told his ministers. The West threatens, Russia applauds, China observes. Each plays its game. But the board must remain ours. Meanwhile, Ankara wasted no time. Turkey announced an expansion of hospitals, schools, and relief missions across the Sahel. At a press briefing, a Turkish official declared, "Burkina Faso does not stand alone. We stand ready as a bridge, a brother, a partner in faith and in development." From the palace, Traoré listened to these voices, his hand tapping against the table. "So the world debates whether we are mad or brave," he said softly. "But tell me, is it madness to demand respect? Or is it bravery to walk away from dependency?" Outside, the streets of Ouagadougou thundered with chants. Protesters lifted signs high into the air, one painted boldly with the words, "Our sovereignty is our survival." Crowds filled the city squares. echoing the captain's defiance. Across the ocean, Washington trembled. Senators grilled experts in packed committee rooms. If a small nation can dismiss us, one lawmaker pressed, how many others might follow? What if Mali? What if Niger? What if the whole Sahel turns? Fear rippled through corridors that once assumed obedience. In Paris, editorials warned of collapse, calling Traore a gambler playing with fire in a powder keg. In Moscow, he was hailed as the young lion. In Beijing, commentary spoke of patience. In Ankara, he was embraced as a brother of the Ummah. Once more, Traore gathered his ministers. Listen to their words, he told them. Some predict our collapse. Others sing our praises. Others wait in silence. But none of them understand. We are not performing for their approval. We are reclaiming our breath. Is it not time that Africa speaks in its own voice, and not as an echo of others? The chamber fell silent. For decades, it had been foreign reports, drafted in Washington, in Geneva, that defined Africa's victims, Africa's criminals, Africa's heroes. But on August 18, 2025, Burkina Faso tore the script apart. Traore turned to his counsel. Tell me, he asked, who has written our story until now? Was it us, bleeding in Sahel dust? Or men in suits who never walked our villages? A minister finally answered, it was always them, Captain. They wrote us as weak, as dependent, sometimes even as villains. Traore leaned forward, his eyes hard. Then hear me clearly. From this day, the ink is ours. No foreigner will decide whether our soldiers are martyrs or murderers. Outside, a new flag was rising, not the stars and stripes, but the banner of the AES alliance. Since 2023, youth across Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger had carried its green and red colors, chanting, Africa decides for Africa. The contrast was striking. One embassy gate sealed shut, the American flag lowered in silence, while the AES flag soared above the crowds, lifted by voices that refused to bow. An old veteran leaned on his cane, watching the scene with tears in his eyes. For too long, he muttered, they called us beggars of aid. Today, we answer as authors of dignity. Western analysts sneered. Traore is reckless, one said on television. He is not leading a nation. He is trying to control the narrative. But in Ouagadougou, Traore stood tall before the cameras. This is not merely diplomacy, he declared. This is the battle for the African voice. For decades, the West claimed the right to name us. Today, we reclaim that right. When a soldier dies defending Djibo or Kaya, do they call him a criminal? When our daughters are rescued from extremists, do they call their defenders abusers? Who gave them the authority to define our truth? The hall erupted in applause, but Traore raised his hand. Listen, this war is not only fought with bullets, it is fought with words. And words can wound deeper than knives. Radios carried his speech into the villages of Bamako and Nema. Crowds raised the AES flag and chanted, no more borrowed voices. That night, an advisor whispered a warning. Captain, the West owns the media. They shape the world's opinion. Traore's response was sharp. Then let them keep their cameras. We will use our people's voices. A child singing in Kaya tells more truth than 1,000 headlines in Washington. The dignity of Africa is not a press release. It is a heartbeat. In Ouagadougou's central square, artists began painting a mural. On one wall, the American flag was shown descending a pole. Beside it, the AES flag climbed higher, with the words, our story, our pen. Traore visited the site quietly, guarded only by a handful of soldiers. He stared at the wet paint and whispered, is this not the real struggle? Not guns against guns, but voices against silence. Who defines us, them, or ourselves? The young artist, brush still in hand, replied, Captain, they told us our history began with slavery. But now we tell them our history begins with sovereignty. The city pulsed with a new rhythm. For the first time in decades, the blue of the United Nations and the red, white, and blue of America no longer commanded the skyline. Instead, it was the red and green of the Sahel Alliance, declaring itself author of its own destiny. And in that moment, Traore's words rang out over the rooftops. This is not diplomacy. This is Africa reclaiming its breath. But even as chants roared in the streets, the realities of survival pressed in. Markets whispered about food shortages. Clinics counted dwindling supplies. For years, U.S. aid, over $100 million annually, had funded schools, agriculture, and medicine. Now, All of it hung in uncertainty. Inside the council chamber, ministers debated anxiously. One warned, "Captain, without American support, our schools will collapse. Already 6,000 classrooms have closed due to insecurity. What happens if aid vanishes completely?" Traore's reply was cold and deliberate. "Then we must ask, is a classroom built on chains truly a classroom? Better no school today than a generation taught about tomorrow." His words fell like stone. Outside the palace, a farmer in the Sahel echoed the same sentiment unknowingly. "We may starve," he told a reporter, his hands rough from dry soil. "But better to be hungry in dignity than fed in chains." Washington responded with fury. Headlines blared warnings of diplomatic suicide. Officials threatened to freeze funds, suspend cooperation, cut off shipments of grain. Analysts predicted famine, malnutrition, and collapse. Yet in Ouagadougou's main square, students raised their fists. "We are poor, but we are free," they shouted. "We are small, but we decide." That night, Traore convened his generals. Concerns filled the room. "Captain," one asked, "how do we fight jihadists without their logistics, without their weapons?" Traore stood tall, hands clasped behind his back. "Do you not see? They give us rifles, but chain our tongues. They feed us medicine, but poison our dignity. If Russia can give us tools without humiliation, if China can build roads without lectures, then why must we cling to those who despise us?" It was not only rhetoric. Moscow had already dispatched envoys, praising his defiance as anti-colonial courage. Beijing had quietly offered new trade credits. And across the Sahel, the people raised their own voices, louder than ever before. Ankara pledged to expand humanitarian hospitals. The Sahel Alliance, Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso vowed to pool resources and strengthen military ties. The question lingered: could hope grow in a place where aid had been cut? One evening, Captain Traore walked through a camp of displaced families, over 2 million citizens scattered by conflict. A small child tugged his arm and whispered, "Captain, will we have food?" Traore knelt, meeting the child's eyes. "Maybe less food today," he said gently, "but more freedom tomorrow. And freedom will feed your soul long after bread is gone." The crowd fell silent until an elder finally spoke. "We have buried too many sons to kneel again. Let hunger test us. It will not break us." That night, state television broadcast the moment. Commentators called it Captain Ibrahim's latest message, framing it not as weakness, but as leadership that stood shoulder to shoulder with the people. Across the country, villagers repeated the child's words like prophecy. In Bamako, Mali's leaders declared, "This is the dawn of a Sahel that speaks for itself." In Niamey, Niger's generals pledged joint patrols. Moscow state media hailed Traore as a lion of sovereignty. Beijing stayed silent, but silence itself became diplomacy. From continent to continent, debates swirled. But in Ouagadougou, the question was sharper. Was it worth risking famine for dignity? Could foreign aid ever replace sovereignty? And if dignity was gone, did bread still taste the same? By late August, murals spread across city walls, an American flag lowered, the U.S. flag rising. Painted beneath were the words, "We may have little, but it is ours." On radios, one phrase echoed again and again. Burkina Faso latest news: sovereignty is not for sale. In the dusty Sahel wind, Captain Traore's voice seemed to linger. "We are not choosing hunger. We are choosing freedom." Outside the U.S. Embassy gates, the flag was lowered in silence. But on the very same boulevard, students marched with the U.S. banner high, shouting until their voices cracked. "Africa rise! Africa rise!" From the balcony of the presidential palace, Traore watched both images unfold, one fading, the other soaring. "Do you see?" he murmured to his advisors. "We are not burying ourselves. We are planting a flag that will outlive us." The symbolism was undeniable. One power had departed. Another vision had taken root. But as drums echoed in the square, the question sharpened. Was this true liberation from the long shadow of Western control, or the first step into dangerous isolation? Could a poor nation carry its dignity and still survive? Or would hunger test the very soul of its people? At the rally, an elder raised his hand. "Traore, you gave us back our pride. Even if the road is hard, we will walk it with you." The crowd erupted, their voices rising into a chorus. Was this not the sound of a continent reclaiming its voice? That night's broadcast framed it as more than one man's decision. It was a generation demanding to be heard. Commentators reminded viewers, even the smallest state can shake the world when it chooses sovereignty over submission. Hours later, a new headline echoed across radios. Burkina Faso latest news, dignity is not for sale. When a journalist asked, Captain, history will ask what you chose, food or freedom. How will you answer? Traore looked into the camera, his voice steady. I chose freedom, because without it, food turns to ash. This was Captain Ibrahim's latest message, echoing far beyond the Sahel. And now, the choice belongs to you watching this story. What does Africa's future mean to you? Do you see courage, or do you see risk? If this story moved something in you, don't let it fade. Say New Africa in the comments. Share it, speak it, subscribe, because they've hidden our history long enough. Let's declare our future out loud. Drop one word of faith in the comments. Keep the flame alive. Thank you for being here.